I guess a question you might be asking is, why the heck is a strength and conditioning coach caught up in learning? In particular, the area which I've been investigating for quite a period of time now is classroom learning, and it's pretty simple. I view coaching as just another form of education. And there's some distinct holes especially within elite coaching practices, on how we educate athletes and upskill athletes, and how do we make sure that the message is getting across. So if we think about the environment we're actually in right now tonight, this is a pretty common environment I'm exposed to on a daily basis, or if I have a new squad coming through. We have a room full of people here because they want to learn. Now, if we get a squad full of athletes coming into us at the VIS, or you get a squad full of athletes turning up one of your training sessions, theoretically it should be easy to teach them. They're all there because they want to be there, okay? So if we don't get the message across to them, we don't upskill them, we don't teach them, whose fault is that? Is it the athletes, or in this case, is it the room full of people that want to be here? It's not their fault. It reflects on us as educators and as teachers, as coaches, okay? The unfortunate thing is, in the coaching environment, we don't always get the message across. And I've got a list of athletes I worked with over the years where I just know, after my time working with them, I really didn't do it as an effective job as I would have liked. So they walked out of that session satisfied, or ended their careers, or ended their time with the squads I was coaching, and they got the most out of it. Over time, what I realised with that is that's not a pitfall of what I'm doing. I just need to get better skilled myself at understanding how I communicate with people. So when I started looking into better coaching practices, there was some real sort of quality information at some very basic level about how we communicate with people with elite sport, but there was some huge holes there as well, and how do we cater for those individuals? So I had to turn to the education system to be able to do that. So I'm not going to pretend for 1 minute that the information I'm presenting you tonight is my own. Okay, I've completely and utterly plagiarised this. I'm not afraid to admit it. But let's be honest, that's what research is. You copy one person once, was it plagiarism? You copy 1,000 people 1,000,000 times, it's called research. So we'll claim this as research. All right, so how do we coach? If we think about the coaching structures we go through under the Sports Commission model and everything like that, we're generally taught certain structures within our coaching. What are those coaching styles that we're taught? Just throw them out. We've all been through this if you've been coaching. What are the coaching styles? There's normally 3 that get taught within the system. Authoritarian, cooperative, and the casual. Okay, and this is where our basic coach education starts. We can insert 1,001 other labels there, and basically as we go through the coaching system, we put more categories and subcategories within those 3 key labels, okay? And then what we do, we kind of blend and mould all those together and form some kind of theory on how we coach. Well, do we really want to focus on the methods within coaching? Okay? All this stuff is, nice to have down on a piece of paper, but unless we have an understanding of what we're going to apply with one of those styles, it's kind of a pointless exercise, isn't it? So what are successful coaching techniques? I'm not talking about the content, I'm talking about the delivery. What are poor coaching techniques? This is just as important to know what the poor techniques are as what the good techniques are. Because if we know what the poor ones are, we can catch ourselves out when we're doing it and stop doing it. Okay, because we know that's going to have no effect on us or our athletes. How do we sort out the fact from fiction when it comes to coaching style and technique? So these are the questions I was asking myself when I started heading down this pathway. So if we think about the palette we develop with our coaching careers, quite often we start off with a very simplistic type concept. So if we're thinking about if we're drawing a picture, or we're in primary school and we're learning how to paint, we start off with one colour, we draw a pretty simple picture. And over time, we learn that there's more colours in the world. Okay, but we tend to keep them quite separate from each other. What we really want is the ability to blend all those colours and shades together. Okay? And from the blending of that, we find out there's all these new other combinations of all these coaching techniques and styles and everything like that that paints that picture. The really interesting about this picture I've got here is it's three-dimensional. There's texture to it, there's depth to it as well. Okay? So it's not only the content we're doing, it's not the way we're delivering, but it's how much and when. When's it appropriate to do more, give more of a certain style? When's it appropriate to back off? How do I blend for one person at one time of the day? Is that different to how it is at the back end of the day? What's the circumstances in their life? So there's all these other, highly complicated and involving scenarios that allow us to blend and really requires us to blend to be able to teach effectively on a daily basis. So when we think about coaching, coaches and support staff talk a lot to each other about session content testing. Athletes, lack of time, lack of resources. I think we'd all agree, we always complain about lack of resources, we always want more money. To be honest with you, a lot of our meetings over the road on a daily basis consist of this type content. And these are common topics to talk about. Very little time is spent talking to other coaches and support staff on how we communicate with each other and how we communicate with our athletes. What technique did you use today to get through to X athlete? I've been struggling to work with this athlete and get them to do this. How did you succeed in doing that? Generally, coaches are left to their own style and professional independence. Quite often we'll go and observe a training session, we'll see a practice in place and we'll go, oh, I'm not sure about that, but do we ever question that? Critically as well as constructively. So do we really get down the nuts and bolts and go, oh, okay, there's something I didn't like, but there's something I can take away from that, or vice versa. You look at a good coach and go, oh, there's a couple of things I'm not doing right. Did anyone see that pre-game interview or presentation that Mark Neild gave the other week? He got absolutely smashed about it in the media. I don't know what he was getting smashed about. First of all, it was 2 hours before the game. Secondly, let's be honest, not many athletes actually take on any messages on game day anyway. I think the next day, what's his name that used to coach up at Brisbane, Lee Matthews, said the last 3 years he didn't even bother giving the pre-game address. He said just went in one ear and out the other anyway. All he did was reiterate the important points from the previous week, or the week's training. I thought it was a great little insight in what he did. He didn't get emotional about it. He just said what he had to say and let them get out there and think about it. They generally view their own effectiveness of their techniques with little external contribution. Okay, so we tend to go through the system of coaching and development based on what our opinions are of ourselves. Okay, hopefully what I'll take you through tonight is some more objective ways in which you can critique yourself. So it's pretty important from this point on that I want you to wear 2 hats as we're going through the rest of this content. One is hat of a coach, so how you take this information on board and how you're going to apply it to the people you're teaching. But also the second hat is as the learner. Okay, so how you learn. How do you take on information? Successful results lead to repeating of the same training structures during the following preparation throughout through the evaluation of outcomes, but not the method in which it was applied. So basically what that long-winded sentence is saying is it's a general rule, if we do something successfully, we'll repeat that again and again and again, quite often without the sound review process to pick out the things that aren't successful, the micro elements of that program, and make sure we don't make those mistakes again. If we're repeating the same programming year after year, we're not really critically assessing our programming. My personal rule is if I'm doing something the same way as I was doing 6 months ago, I haven't improved my coaching. I have to have some fundamental change within my coaching every 6 months. All right, so what's the goal? How do we react to the athlete, how the athlete interprets, accommodates, rejects, or reinvents the content? Okay. Pretty interesting one, reinvent and reject. Okay, what happens when an athlete says to you, I don't believe that? Anyone had that? You're wrong. What do? I know what I do. crap myself. I'm sitting there going, geez, wasn't expecting that. Or what if they reinvent the construct? Oh, that's fine now, but I was doing that 6 months ago. I'm now doing this. Okay. So we've got to have the strategies to be able to mould our thinking and be quite lively with our thinking and change our thought process. How to react when the athlete applies the content to another task, and how the athlete acts in light of success or failure based on the methods utilised. So if we see them reacting well in a certain environment, what's the content we can take out of the way we've applied that method and apply it to something which they're not reacting very well to? So it's our intuition and our observations within the session itself. How we improve our ability to fully integrate within the programs we are involved with. Just put your hand up if you're coaching groups right now. Who's lucky enough to have their group for more than 8 sessions a week? 5 sessions a week. 2 sessions a week. 1 session a week. Really tough with 1 or 2 sessions a week on being fully integrated with what that athlete is trying to achieve, what outcome they're trying to achieve. Pretty simple for me. I have full control, so to speak, of the interaction. I can turn up at every training session and be part of every training session. But it's one thing we really need to consider. If we want them to buy into what we're instructing them on, we've got to buy in completely what they're trying to achieve. So when I'm talking about integration, it's how do we have the athlete believe that we are 100% committed to the outcome that they're trying to achieve. Athletes smell a BS artist really, really quickly. And if you're not really buying into what they're trying to achieve, they'll write you off real quick. How do we fully integrate into the process, successes and failures of our athletes? We need to take responsibility for their failures as much as their successes. Okay? The younger the age group, the more responsibility we've got to take in the failure. Because they don't know what they don't know. It's our job to upskill them. The higher the level goes, the less influence we actually have. There's some really interesting, and just considering there's a couple of coaches in the AFL right now with their heads on the chopping block, there's some really interesting research that's been done out of the US and Europe on changing coaches mid-season with elite sporting teams. It has no bearing whatsoever on improved performance. It's effective for 1 game, I think the statistics show. So it just goes to show that at that highest level, the true impact of coaches is relatively minimal. But at the lower level, it actually has more influence than what the athlete's performance does. Okay. I'm not going to go through this in detail, it's just a concept. So if we think about our interactions, we basically sit in these 4 paradigms, okay? Coaching tends to sit in this one here, okay? And we work on behavioural leadership, we work on our knowledge, our skills, our attitude. We talk about this one a lot, but not a lot of coaches actually spend a lot of time here, okay? This tends to be the athlete's domain. This tends to be the perception of those observing. Good, successful coaching integrates all of these. So when we started looking outside sport, I looked at our role as basically being educators. Okay? We applied the academic knowledge that's out there and used that in the context of how do I correct technique in the gym, or how do I enhance their concept of taking something which they've learned in the preparation environment out onto the field of play. How does that influence then how we analytically look at our performance? So we always talk about statistics, and statistics is getting out of control in the way it's integrating within sport, but we also need a clear model on how we interpret and deliver those statistics to our athletes. We're borderline maths teachers these days. Research in the classroom education is vast in crossing cultural, social, economic, gender, and generational cohorts. So in a nutshell, it covers off everything we're ever going to be exposed to. And it's done at a level of depth that's well and truly beyond what sporting research can ever cover. Distinct trends have developed over time on what's successful. And the data tells a story of strategies that we can use. It doesn't tell us the absolutes, and there's no such thing as an absolute. There's no recipe. There's no framework that's ever been proven to be the absolute perfect model. So what we do is we take all these little bits of information, mould it together like we're talking about with the palette before, and come up with some kind of concept that fits the individual. So the data. The fundamental analysis of this information I'm presenting you today comes from 800 meta-analysis. It involved about, I think it was 1.4 million students, 30 years of research by a guy named John Hattie. If those who are interested in going through the content for tonight in more detail, there's a book called Visible Learning, published in 2008, where all this is summarised. Okay. The data has been converted into effect scale. Now, some mathematical stuff here. Who's dealt with effect sizes before? All right. What we're looking at, a 0 score, which is round about there, means no effect, okay? Anything to the left of the 0, so any negative number, means a negative effect on learning. So basically people are getting dumber. I'm subtle. Anything that's a positive score is improving people's knowledge, okay? So pretty simple to work. A value of 1 is 1 standard deviation above the mean. Okay, so you're in the top, I think it's 13th percentile above 1. All right? Now, as you can see, if the 0 point's around here, and this is all classroom education, there's not a lot of stuff that's done in the classroom that actually makes kids dumber. Yeah? There's a truckload there that improves performance. Is that any different to the sporting field? Absolutely not. Someone turns up at training and actually starts training, they're going to get better, regardless of what the content is. Okay? If they don't turn up at training, they're not going to get any better. So the shape of this graph fits in with sport pretty nicely. But here's a little problem. The midpoint, and this fits a bell curve, the midpoint actually occurs around about 0.4. Okay? So basically what we're saying is between the 0 point here and 0.4, we're still getting an improvement in learning, but it's on the bottom half. It's probably not as effective really as what's occurring through here. So what we want to do is focus in on these techniques through this area here to make sure that the coaching and the learning that's going on is above the norm. Does that make sense? So everyone have a concept of that. It's important because most of the stuff we're going to go through from now is going to be referring back to that 0.4 mark and the effect sizes. Anyone need more clarity? I'm more than happy to go through it. Okay. So we have a couple of hinge points. So 0 and net deterioration of performance, anything to the left of 0, any negative number. The second hinge point is 0.15. And the classroom, that's been shown to be the normal rate of improvement just through development, through normal development. So exposure to life. Mm-hmm. The second hinge point is, like I was saying, is the 0.4, the mean effect score over the 800 analysis. And this is plagiarised straight from Hattie. So basically what we're saying is anything less than 0.15, we've had no influence of in terms of learning, okay? Because we consider 0 to 0.15 as being normal learning development. So we want our minimum standard for anything that we apply to be 0.15 or higher, preferably 0.4 or higher. That all make sense? Right. So what are the poor performers? Distance education. So when we talk about distance education, we talk about remote coaching. I've been in my role for 10 years now at the VIS, and I used to think I was pretty good at coaching people via the internet and stuff and remote programs when they're overseas. Every single year, I've realised I've gotten worse and worse at it. So more technology available. I reckon I'm better at my job. I reckon my program is better, but I'm less and less satisfied that the message is getting across because we don't have the interface. We don't have the ability to read people. We don't have the ability to react to the physicality of what they're doing on a daily basis. We lose that ingrained ability to communicate face to face. So if we're stuck with people in that remote environment, we clearly need to use technologies better. And I'm still yet to find a technology that's anywhere remotely close to the ability to be able to talk to someone one-on-one. Student control over learning. Who coaches kids under 10? Can you imagine if you let little buggers run their own session? It just becomes anarchy. That doesn't get much better as they get older, believe it or not. They're just slyer in doing what they want to do. We need to be organised. We need to be structured. We need to be well planned. One of the few pieces of quality research into high-performance coaches shows that those who are the most organised are the ones who are the most successful. Okay? As soon as we get unorganised, we slip into athlete control. Athlete control of the learning environment gets away from having a set plan of progression through what we're trying to achieve. This differs vastly from an athlete contribution. We want athletes to be able to contribute back into the process. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of the coaches to come up with a very well planned out thought process of how we apply that learning. Retention. This is probably the biggest, next to bad classroom behaviour. Imagine bad behaviour in a training session. That's probably the biggest limiter of learning. And what retention is in the classroom is keeping kids down a year. And the way it's expressed within Hattie's research is that, let's think about it logically, kid's gone through a 12-month experience in the classroom. We're going to give him the same class content. We're going to give him the same teacher. He doesn't want to be there. And you factor in the socio-economic costs with it, we can't ever expect them to achieve beyond what they did the previous year anyway. It's no different when we think about a performance level. If we're holding a kid back within their sporting endeavours, and we're going to expose them to the same curriculum in the training environment the next year, we can't expect a different response. We've got to change the response. We've got to give them something different, whether that's a different coach or a different methodology or a different environment, different sport, whatever, but we can't repeat the same. Mobility. I've thrown Kurt Tippett up there. He was just the first person I thought of that switched teams this year in the AFL. Going from one environment to another environment because they weren't successful doesn't solve the fundamental problem of why didn't they learn. Unless we fix the learning problem, they're still going to be underperforming at that new environment. So switching from one club to another club because they're not happy with the coach, that won't necessarily fix the problem. More often than not, they'll actually regress further. Robin, I'm just thinking there's someone in the ANZ Championship that did that this year.
Gary Ablett.
Was he despondent with the training environment? No. He changed for money. So, I want to clarify that. We're talking about people who are disenchanted and aren't performing. Gary Ablett was killing everyone now. He'll beat Geelong on his own on the weekend probably now. Summer vacation. We work off 48-week training years. So basically, our athletes get 4 weeks off a year. Anything more than that, we're really starting to detrain, physically. Mentally, it doesn't change too much, but certainly physically it does. The golden rule I work off is every week of training we miss takes 2 weeks to get that back. So if I miss this week, in 2 weeks' time after I recommence training, I'll be back to where I was, but with the week I've already lost, it's really 3 weeks, isn't it? And I'm kind of 3 weeks behind where I was, so it's kind of 6 weeks in real terms. So in other words, keep them training. Little side note to that, priority for a strength and conditioning coach, keep your athletes healthy. Your athletes are injured, they're not training. They're not training, they're basically on summer vacation. They're getting worse. The near misses. Finances. And Formula One is the perfect example of where finances clearly demonstrates that how much money a team has relative to the performance they deliver is not linear. Okay? Minardi, Paul Stoddard's old team, which he was running off a shoestring budget of about £50 million or whatever it was at the time, was going head-to-head with Ferrari. This is in the late 90s, early 2000s, with a budget of £500 million, and they were achieving 97% of the on-track performance. Okay? We think of our environment here on a daily basis. Our results at the VIS on a fraction of the budget of the AIS is pretty similar. Okay? It's the content that's delivered. It's the people that surround your environment are your assets and your true finance, not the amount of money in your back pocket. What we've got to be is smarter on how we use our resources and who we engage to complement those resources. We don't have the money to invest big time money, so what do? We engage universities. We've got students and academics lining up left, right and centre that want to be involved with our programs. But it's also about giving the opportunity of them to buy into what we're doing. So I was talking about earlier about being fully ingrained and integrated within our programs. Class size, 0.21. Doesn't really have that bigger effect on teaching in the classroom. Now, this is probably the single biggest one in education that's argued by the teachers. Are there any teachers here? Ooh. You guys will know. It's argued, we reduce classroom size, we'll get better results. It should. Better ratios, more contact with the students, better delivery methods should equate to better adaptation of information. But unfortunately, the research just does not back that up. So what we need to question then is not the classroom size, but the delivery method. Teacher subject matter. I used to do some lecturing out at a couple of universities, and I just always made sure I was one class ahead of where the students were. And if they asked me any curly questions, I go, yeah, we're out of time now. We'll pick that up at the start of the next class. Don't laugh, Robin, you employed me. It's not the content. We can always upskill on the content, and we should never be afraid of, if we don't know content, to turn around and say to the person we're coaching or teaching, I don't know that, I will go away and find out. Okay? A lot of this is relationship building and the honesty that's required to be able to get the message across, and the ability to say, I don't know, or I stuffed up, or take responsibility for anything that hasn't gone quite right with what you've prescribed for them, is as important as what it is the quality stuff that you're delivering. The methodology and process of teaching is more important than the complex content. Extracurricular activities. For you guys at the back there, you're shooting an apple off the guy's head. I just thought it was funny. Extracurricular activities and programs has been shown to be effective if you can relate the content back to what you're trying to teach in your normal environment. How many of you guys have taken groups away on training camps? What's the motivation of a training camp? It's normally to take people away in a different environment and do something fun. If you can relate the fun activity in that different environment back to the fundamentally what you're trying to learn in the training, the day-to-day environment, you'll see a big adaptation. Okay? Experiential learning, which is what's called experiencing a different environment and putting people you're working with in challenging environments, has been shown to be very, very, very effective in learning. Okay? But it has to be relevant. Learning hierarchies. So when we're talking about learning hierarchies, what we're talking about is basically information overload. What's the fundamental message we're trying to get across for that one training session? find out what that message is, hone in on that message. As soon as we start layering information, it's too much. We know with motor control, so the ability to learn new skills, the brain only functions on the most complex task that we give it at one time. So if I'm overloading with information on, okay, so say I'm teaching a squat in the gym. If I'm overloading them saying, right, you need to go hips back, bend your knees, keep your spine shape, blah, 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 it's too much. All the brain will do will identify the most difficult part of that, which is keeping my spine straight, and we'll hone in on that, and everything else will just go by the wayside. The other important thing to consider with that is how many things can blokes think about at one time? One. How many things can girls think about at one time? Heaps. But they worry about the whole time whether they're absolutely absorbing it 100% of the whole time. So how many things can girls absorb at one time? One. Keep it simple. The simpler the message, the more concise the message, the better the results will be. Mentoring. I was a bit surprised when I saw mentoring at a score of 0.15. This is Drew Ginn here, 3-time Olympic gold medalist. Josh Dunkley-Smith, who got a silver at the last Olympics rowing with Drew. Just putting someone in the environment with someone who has achieved doesn't produce results. There needs to be some kind of interaction there. Okay, and we'll see in a few slides' time the difference when they start to integrate with each other. It's actually no different to the normal developmental effect. Osmosis learning does not work because there's no construct to it. There's no context to it. We need to be able to direct them through that process. We need to teach them how to communicate with their mentors. Individualised instruction. We overcomplicate coaching. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to keep the message simple. We don't need to come up with these elaborate, complicated matrix processes that describe every single motor skill in the infinite detail. The athlete can't take that in. What we need is context. Context back to what they want to do on the sporting field. Okay? I know there's a couple of golf guys here. Where are the golf guys? One. Golf, unfortunately, I was talking to a guy that looks after Aaron Badley the other day, Simon Webb, who you know, and it infuriates him working with Bads. Bads is the most technically minded golfer in the world, but he gets so caught up in every single perfect angle, you can't hit the ball over there. I've seen practice rounds on YouTube, I love YouTube, it's great, with Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods on his practice rounds, he just picks one of the other guys to play with, and all they do is gamble the whole time. And they'll hide themselves behind a tree, and say, all right, you've got to draw the ball around the tree, land it 10 feet right of the hole and run it up. It's outcome-based. It's not technically based. They've got the skills. They're at that level already. They don't need to develop the skills. They need to work out how to apply that in the situation, okay? When we start getting down to very nitty-gritty individualised instruction and we get obsessed with how everyone's fundamentally perfectly different from everyone else, we just miss the big picture. Okay? Come back to the outcome. What is the outcome we're trying to achieve? Motor control is too complex and we have absolutely no understanding of any detail of what motor control really looks like. There's been 6 researchers in the world that I'm aware of right now that are even coming close to just describing what motor control truly is, let alone how we improve it. Okay? Come back to the context of the performance. Competitive versus individualistic environment. This has been really well researched in business. Okay? Successful businesses do not have competitiveness within the workplace. Because if I was to set up some kind of competitive structure and had this table coming up with a plan of attack for a project versus this table, and there was some reward associated with that, do you reckon these two tables are going to talk to each other? So we're not creating some kind of collaborative learning environment. So the collaborative learning environment means that there's open communication. It means that if these guys are working on the same problem as these guys, and they hit a stumbling block, they can communicate across to this group here and resolve the problem. The competitive environment when we're trying to develop skills does not achieve that at all. Comprehensive teaching, what they're referring to there is fundamental policy change. Our environment, the sports science environment, is kind of going through this a little bit right now. The problem with policy change isn't the concept of what they're trying to apply, it's the accepting of that from everyone involved within that change. So teaching reforms only work when the teachers buy into the change. If they don't buy into it, it's just another regulation they've got to go off, okay? If we think about this in the training environment, if we fundamentally change the construct of our training environment, in my world, it's as simple as changing the days on the week or changing the hour a day which we train. The athletes don't buy into that. I run into some fundamental problems. I've got a training session we normally start at 5:30 Thursday morning, so tomorrow morning. And we played Monday night, and we normally play Sunday. This is with one of the groups I work with. So I thought I'll do the right thing by them. I'll give them Thursday morning off and we'll train Thursday night. Well, World War III broke out. So now I'm training half the group at 5:30 tomorrow morning, half the group tomorrow night, for no other reason than they didn't buy into the rationale of why I wanted that change in time. I forgot to tell them it was so they could sleep in and they'd feel better. You reckon that would be a pretty important one if I'm trying to give them the morning off. So we've got to be a lot of clarity whenever we're making any changes within our constructs. Co-teaching environments, especially with young kids, leads to confusion. Okay? Co-teaching environments where we have a defined head coach and someone complementing that skill set works well. When we have two people delivering the same message and there's contrast with that message, nothing gets across. This is one of the ANZ Championship, or a pair of the ANZ Championship coaches. They just went with her about 3 weeks ago. They actually started winning since they went to that model. It's no reflection on either of them as a coach, just the environment wasn't right. Same team, same content, different environment. Who's gone through LTAD workshops, long-term athlete development? Who likes them? Oh, now you're all scared. He likes them. I've had World War III with him a few times. What some of these scripted programs assume is that learning process is linear. Okay, so if I achieve this competency in this skill set, it means I'm ready for this skill set. Once I'm competent in this skill set, it leads to this skill set. The reality is we progress and regress through our learning at vastly different rates. And what we're really looking for is sort of a stock market approach. Okay? We're going to have peaks and troughs in our acquisition of ability, but we want the trend to be nice and consistent over time. The key element of this is identifying when the trend starts to fall away, when we're starting to see a trough, and intervene and fix the practice at that moment in time. And most of the time, it's, again, the delivery of the message to the coach, from the coach to the athlete. The secondary element of that is it tends to be a slow process. Now, if we have someone who's highly skilled, and we'll see in a couple of slides' time, we want to accelerate them through the process as quickly as possible. Give them a new challenge. For the teachers out there, where's the homework situation in schools these days? Yeah. It's completely ineffective. And the reason for that is, if you want someone to go home and learn something that they don't know, what do they require? Someone to teach them. So if you're sending someone home, starting to work on their homework, or in sports context, working on skill sets that they don't know how to achieve, and we don't have someone there to advise them on how to do it correctly, all you're doing is reinforcing that they can't do something well. We're actually reinforcing a negative behavioural change. Superficial homework is very effective. So the reinforcement of the basic tasks that they've gone through. So for instance, if you've got a group at footy training or cricket training or something like that, and there's some fundamental strategical element that you want them to work on, you can send them home to watch a game on the weekend, an AFL game on the weekend or a cricket game on the weekend, and get them to look for the construct of what you've described them. That's superficial learning. It's reinforcement of something which is a relatively simple observation for them. But what it doesn't require is high-level feedback. So this is the areas we've got to start really getting into. Reciprocal teaching. Getting the person you're working with to teach you. Very quickly we can establish whether they've taken the message on board. Very quickly we can establish whether there's been clarity in our delivery to the athlete. If they can deliver the message back to you with the same clarity that you assumed you gave them, there's a pretty good chance that they've not only taken that information on board, but they're going to retain that for a long period of time. Study skills, teaching kids how to train. Our biggest battle right now, I'll be brutally honest with you, when we have new people coming on board with this, is actually knowing what hard work's all about, what training actually looks like. And Simon's helping me with a group right now who I've only been working with for about 3 or 4 weeks, and we're dedicating the next 6 months, nothing performance-wise, just teaching them how to train. Train with intent and train with intensity, to ask the correct questions, to make sure that they can challenge us as coaches, making sure we can challenge them, and building the trust over time. And training skills is as important a skill as any fundamental of the performance that you're trying to achieve. All right, I said mentoring wasn't effective. Peer tutoring is. The fundamental difference between that is the construct. So what information is the experienced performer delivering to the inexperienced performer? Now I set this up in our environment. So I'll word up a senior member of the group and say, look, I'm working on X, Y, Z with this athlete. Do you mind if I buddy them up with you for the day? And you just reinforce that message. Firstly, it does 2 things. Firstly, with the experienced performer, quite often it reminds them of the fundamentals of the task they're trying to achieve themselves, so there's some add-on learning for them. Secondly, it builds trust between the experienced and the unexperienced, which creates a great learning environment and creates great team culture. Quite often we get this separation in team culture with the oldies and the youngies. The quicker we can draw them together and have this environment where the older athletes are investing in the younger athletes, the quicker we can all get on the same page and develop. Providing formulative evaluation. This is report writing. Doesn't need to be detailed, but what it needs to be is honest. And it needs to cover off important aspects of what the learning outcomes are. Did you achieve X, Y, Z tasks, which we've been working on for a period of time? Why? Why not? From there, you can sit down and make a plan of progression. Okay? If they don't know what they're achieving, what they don't, and what they're not achieving, how can we expect them to buy into the changes that we're trying to put in place? Mastery learning, the striving for perfection. Coaching is a difficult occupation. It is inherently negative. We're always telling people what they're doing wrong. How we frame that information and what direction we're trying to create to head towards this mastery learning, this professional perfect model is quite important. And this is probably one area which I'm still more than happy to admit I'm still working through. How do I get a high performer and still be able to say to them, I want more, I want more, I want more perfection out of that, but do it in a way in which I'm not tearing them down. So if anyone's got any answers to that one, please share them.
Positive self-development.
Yeah, we need to talk more. Concept mapping. This is a real life one too. This is Mark Webber's career path. I saw this on Twitter or Facebook or whatever the hell social media, I don't know, gets thrown in my inbox. And this dates back, I think he wrote this in about 94, basically the pathway to get to Formula One. And it pretty much followed, I think it was this pathway on the right here, with a slight detour. He didn't do Indy cars, he did sports cars. But having some kind of long-term plan in place, if you do, so we're going to go this level, this level, this level, that's going to get us to this outcome. It's not highly detailed, it's not the nitty-gritty of we have to hit this benchmark. It just gives them some kind of targets to aim for and make sure that final step isn't too extravagant.
How old was he when that started?
15, I believe. He was in go-karts. Actually, no, motocross. I think he was a motocross rider originally. My belief is this is the most critical for us, and it's the relationship we have with our athletes. I don't treat the athletes I work with any different to how I treat my family or how I treat my friends or how I treat the colleagues in the office. And it's built around trust and respect. I'm completely honest with them on a daily basis. I don't hide anything from them. If they want to view any information I've got, they're more than happy to do that. I'm completely transparent in how I come up to the decision why we're doing a training practice. And that building of the relationship and the fostering of that over time, I've found more often than not heads off most problems before they become problems. As soon as you become secretive, as soon as we create this environment where it seems like part of the message isn't being shared, that's when we get in strife. So if you didn't buy into him at first though, did she? No, she didn't. And Marv's tough. And it's a bit of both ways. Marv challenges, so this is Martin Barras and Amirs. And if any of you guys didn't see the documentary that was on a couple of weeks ago, jump on SBS, I think it was, on their website, it's up there. It's well worth a look just at the relationships between the two coaches over that 4 or 6 year period. But yeah, he's a hard man, but he's very, very, very honest, and the expectations are very, very clear. And she's hard too. She's really, really hard on her coaches. If you don't come, I think she says in the documentary, I've seen it firsthand with her, if you don't come prepared to work with her, she'll go. She'll go somewhere else. The track cyclists, they're a pretty intense bunch. Everyone's had the pleasure of working with them, and yeah, they're no BS. Micro-teaching. So what micro-teaching is stepping in, a little bit of advice, stepping back and letting people evolve. So it's the exact opposite of over-coaching or over-teaching. People are in the environment of sport because they enjoy that environment. We've got to give them the freedom and space to move within that environment. Okay? A little bit often is more effective than hounding them. Okay? This is Roger Federer and, what's his name? Tony Roach. Tony Roach has been an advisor for Roger Federer for 15 years. Federer's coached himself basically over that time frame. But every now and again, Tony Roach just turns up and gives a little bit of, I believe Pat Rafter influences him a little bit these days as well, more with the grass stuff. Accelerated learning. This is Kim Crow at the back. You guys would have recognised Kim Crow from the Olympics, silver and bronze in the double and the single. This was Kim, and that's Sarah Crooks. Sarah Crooks actually transferred across to sailing now and doing a great job within sailing. This was the final of the Beijing Olympics in the pair. They were the red hot favourites going in. The fly and die ended up coming fourth. That's with about 250 to go when they realised they're about done. But with Kim had only been rowing for about 2 years before that. But the skill sets were developing at such an alarming rate that, you know what, just throw them out there. They'll learn more in that environment than what we're going to be from holding them back, just waiting for that perfect time. Okay? It needs support around that environment if you're going to accelerate people, because they're not always going to achieve. More often than not, they're going to fail. But if the right content and the structures are around them, they will prosper in that environment. So it's a bit of the opposite of LTAD. Self-reporting grades, I use these a bucket load. So basically saying to my athletes, you rate that session. They'll give me a rating, they'll let them stew about it for a couple of days, and they'll come back in and say, any more thoughts about that session? And they might rate it again. Sometimes it's the same answer, sometimes it's not. Okay, so I've given them the chance to reflect on that. Then I'll give them my rating of that session. With the experienced athletes, more often than not, they match up pretty nicely. Okay, what you find with an inexperienced athlete, they'll overestimate the quality of that session. What we're looking for is the expectation of the coach and the expectation of the athlete to be the same. Once we're consistently at that level, we know we're on the same page, heading in the right direction. Provides them with ownership of their own performance, because they're judging their performance. It's not the external people judging them on whether they're improved or not. They're judging themselves. And when that judgment matches externals, we're laughing. Professional development. Coaches are appalling at this. Okay? We need to get out of our comfort zone. We need to understand that we don't know the name of the unknown soldier. And we need to improve our practices. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted. You guys are all here tonight. But we need to do more of this. And most of the time, it's people who your resources on a daily basis, people you interact with on a daily basis, other people at your club, other people in your workspace. I talk to teachers ad nauseum about how they control classes. It doesn't need to be formal learning. Feedback. Now, when they refer to feedback here, it's not coach to athlete, it's athlete to coach. All right? We learn more from the effectiveness of our coaching from communicating with the athletes than what they'll ever learn from us. Because based on their feedback, we now have a strategy on how to apply a better learning model. Okay? So whenever you catch yourself talking too much, ask them what they think. Listen to them, react off what they're delivering to you. I can guarantee you'll make more inroads on their performance from that method. We're going to be putting this stuff up on the website, so I won't bother. This will be on the website. It's Hattie's feedback model, and there's some more on strategic and reflective thinking. That's what I wanted to cover off tonight. Does that give you, I guess, and this is just, believe me, this is just an absolute snapshot of some of the options out there. But does that give you a bit of an overview of where my thinking's at, and I guess how I'm trying to develop my thinking as a coach? And does that give you, I guess, some kind of thought process on how you can evolve your learning? Are there any questions?
I'm interested in a couple of the slides, like summer holidays, for example.
Yes.
You know, you mentioned kids throughout the session with different types of learning.
Yep.
And what age are you looking at when you say that, 4 weeks is...
I honestly think when we talk about holidays, we can learn on holidays. We can learn skills on holidays. So I think about when I was growing up, back in my day, my grandparents lived down at Sorrento. What did my brother and I do all day? We'd grab the kids from the local area, we'd go play cricket in the park, etc., kick the footy around, whatever. So we were physically active during that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I'm referring to, is that my alarm bells went off, because I'm thinking for the kids, you want that unstructured time where they're just running free, so to speak.
Yeah. As long as they're active, they'll keep developing. If we put them in an inactive environment, that's when we start to see regression really, really quickly. To be honest with you, the bigger concern today is technology and the influence technology has on kids. I mean, the research is very, very clear in sedentary behaviour, it's going up, and it's very much environmental at home. So we may not, as coaches, if we're not coaching our own kids, we may not have that much influence on that anyway. But that's, yeah, kind of a...
I think for me it's that thing of kids being kids as well, and like letting them develop naturally, and then when they're a little bit older having that structured training time.
Yeah, and that's a real question on when do you start specialising? Our world's a little bit biased on that, I guess. The reality is, as long as they're having fun, it doesn't matter what the activity is. Just the more exposure to different activities at younger ages, if they're enjoying doing it, do it.